Hello and welcome to Just One More Watch. Welcome today to my review of the most sinister watch in Tudor's entire catalogue. This one, the Tudor Pelagos LHD. Why is it sinister? What dark and devious acts has it been up to recently? None, actually. The entire theme of this video is based on the fact that the etymology of the word sinister is from the Latin word for left. Sorry about that. I'll get my coat. Okay, so the Pelagos LHD may not in fact be false, dishonest or prompted by malice or ill will, but it's definitely contrary. I've only looked at a couple of destros on the channel before and they have all been citizen divers. The release of the Rolex GMT Lefty earlier this year may have encouraged a bit more interest in this style of watch, but they are still a rare breed. Originally designed for left-handed people to be worn on the right wrist, they're now being bought increasingly by right-handed people to be worn on the left wrist. Why? Well, I guess having lived with one now for a bit, I can see one advantage but also one disadvantage. Now, I didn't buy this one. I've spent quite enough money on Tudors already this year. It is kindly on loan to the channel by the lovely Adam over in Melbourne, aka Blue Moose Racing on Instagram. After many years of conversing via social media, I finally met Adam at Mr. X's place a couple of months ago and he loaned me his Lefty Pelagos. Thank you again, Adam. Much appreciated, mate. I'll leave a link to his Instagram in the description of the video if you want to see more of this or the rest of his collection. And in honour of his watch, I'm going to use my left hand today. Let's flip the camera and have a look at it. Okay, let's not dilly-dally. I have looked at this watch before at the beginning of last year, or at least I looked at the one with the crown on the traditional right-hand side of the case rather than the left. And I was very positive in that review. I described the Pelagos as mighty and said that I preferred it to the Omega Seamaster because of its lightweight and much cleaner looks. Plus, there's also the bonus that it is now considerably cheaper than the Seamaster. Still not what I call cheap though. $4,725 US dollars or 6,450 Aussie dollars. I did complain a little bit, of course, about the veritable haiku of text on the dial and the fact that it is unnecessarily thick at 14mm, but overall it's a cracker. And this lefty version has all of the strengths, but also all of the weaknesses of the righty. But it does have, I think, one more pro and one more con because of the shift in crown position. Dimensions are unchanged regardless of where the crown is located, those being therefore 42mm in diameter, 14.2mm thick. A lug to lug of just under 50mm, 22mm lug width. There is a nice taper down to 18 and back up to 20 at the clasp, by the way. And sized up for my 7-inch wrist, I added one more link from where Adam had it. It weighs in at 145 grams. Now, objectively, that isn't hugely light. I mean, I'm always banging on about a 40mm stainless steel sports watch sweet spot of 150 grams, so that kind of tells a story. It's a big and chunky 42mm diver that weighs the same as a 40mm diver. And I do mean big and chunky. It may be made of titanium, but there's no getting away from the fact that this watch is over 14mm thick and with a fairly lengthy lug to lug. Female end links definitely help it wear better than it otherwise might do, as does a fantastic clasp with heaps of built-in on-the-fly adjustment. Why is it so chunky? Well, it's chunky because it has 500 meters of water resistance. My argument was and still is that that is excessive. I would much rather have a slimmer watch with less water resistance. And indeed, that's exactly what Tudor have produced with the Pelagos FXD and the Pelagos 39. Both of those watches coming in at 12mm thick and with a still perfectly reasonable 200 meters of water resistance. But hey, this one gets 5 and it gets a helium escape valve opposite the crown to reinforce its hardcore diving chops. The crown is quite clearly screwed down, the sapphire is quite clearly flat, and the ceramic bezel insert is quite clearly beautiful, with a matte finish rather than a gloss finish. In fact, the looks of the Pelagos are the main appeal of the watch for me. The proportions are great. I love the snowflake hands. I love the fact that they are blacked out in the center, meaning they float above that matte black dial. Even if the paint could have been slightly better applied there, I think. The square indices nestle snugly in cutouts on that stepped angled chapter ring. The whole thing just looks fantastic. This lefty has a couple of modifications in the looks department over the regular Pelagos though. Hands and indices all have a pale creamy yellow colour. I wouldn't describe them as photinaed. They're not trying to make the watch look old. This is a far too modern design to try and pull off that trick, and there are plenty of other Black Bay models out there that Tudor have photinaed up to the hilt. They're just there instead perhaps to soften the cold hard aesthetic edge that the regular Pelagos has. Now, I quite like the cold hard aesthetic edge, but I also like this, so the shift in tone is neither a pro nor a con for me. The other modification is to the date wheel. Now this one has a roulette style date wheel, the odds are black, the evens are red, picking out the single line of red text, the model name beneath the pinion. There is no tangible benefit to this style of date wheel, but it's fun, and I wish brands would do it more often. But not only is this watch a looker, it has a cracking movement to back up the good looks, but you can't see it because of that screw-in caseback. Now, when I saw this one, I thought Adam had got some personal inscription. I thought that perhaps 5543 was a meaningful number to him, but he told me that's how many Pelagoses had been sold approximately up to the point in September 2018 when he bought this one. Not quite the same as numbering a limited edition, perhaps more like numbering an unlimited edition. And behind that caseback is this movement. It's a Tudor in-house caliber MT5612 COSC certified chronometer with a 70-hour power reserve. Great movement. It's also really quite good looking in a simple way, much like the watch. The bracelet is a carryover from the righty and as such is pretty special. It's 3-link oyster style with female end links, easy to operate screws, and it's all very smooth and very comfortable on wrist. It has one of the most interesting clasps in the business to boot. Now, interesting can be a bit of a euphemism, and I suppose it is in this case. I love the tech that the clasp contains, and it's just beautiful to use. It has 4 positions of inbuilt micro adjustment, the loosest of which, when selected, engages the 2 springs that you see there, meaning if your wrist continues to expand over the course of a hot day, there is a little bit of extra give, thereby considerably reducing the chances of your hand falling off due to a lack of circulation. I guess it will also help the watch wrap over a thin wetsuit. There's also a very neat diver's extension if your wetsuit is larger. My issue with the clasp is that, as nice as the tech is, I don't need to see the working. I remember the first time I saw that cut out in a jeweler when I tried the Pelagos on, I actually laughed. The watch is such a clean design, I find the hole in the drawing on the clasp a little bit dirty. But it is a treat on wrist, this one. Big and chunky, but still very comfortable. And it has a bag of wrist presence. You do not buy a Pelagos if you're uncomfortable about people noticing the watch on your wrist. And what they will see is a stealthy, dull grey, grade 2 titanium beauty with no polished surfaces anywhere. Some of the surfaces are even quite deliberately rough brushed. I think it looks magnificent. Legibility is fantastic because the hands are well proportioned and because of the off-white on black colour scheme. Chapter ring and bezel markings are also really distinct, everything very clear to read at a glance. And that's the pocket shop. Because of the adjustable clasp, you can wear this one exactly on the wrist where you want to, either high and tight or low and loose, depending on your personal preference. More on that later. The loom is great and seems to have been relatively unaffected by the change of tone to those hands and those indices. Now, I haven't always been as impressed by the loom on members of the Tudor Black Bay range I've reviewed, but this one really is great. So that's a lot of greats, crackings, magnificence and fantastics over the course of one video, isn't it? I do like the Pelagos a lot, but do I like this Pelagos a lot? Well, it has the carryover issues of the RHD. The thickness, the 5 lines of text, and a clasp that takes brutalism a bit too far, I think. And like I said, I can see one specific pro and one specific con to the lefty. The pro is, if you're in the habit of wearing your watch low and loose on the wrist, there is no crown to dig into the back of your hand. How many of you have gotten those little patches on the back of your wrist of drying or dead skin caused by the crown on your watch? I may be a bit of a princess, but I'm sure I'm not alone there. No such dermatological issues with the Tudor Pelagos LHD then, which in my mind is a pro. The con is that the watch is so unintuitive to operate, if you're right-handed. You wind the crown backwards rather than forwards, for example, because they've just flipped the movement, they haven't done anything to it mechanically. Adjusting it feels weird, as does screwing in the crown. So much so, I was tempted to flip the watch upside down, wind and adjust it upside down, and then flip it back the right way, which is the wrong way around for me. So it's a trade-off for me then anyway. You get the unusual looks of this one, plus the creamy hands, plus the roulette date wheel, plus the extra comfort on wrist, but it's a bit awkward when you're not used to performing, let's be honest, fairly simple procedures with your left hand. So then, would I go for the Tudor Pelagos LHD or the Tudor Pelagos RHD? Well, personally, I'd go for neither. Personally, I'd go for the Tudor Pelagos 39mm. It's smaller, it's lighter, it's slimmer, it has less text on the dial, and it looks a little less unconventional than this one. But I totally get why this one spoke to Adam and to others. It's different enough to be interesting, and it's not actually sinister in the slightest. So there you have it, definitely a viable option if you like the Pelagos, regardless of which is your dominant hand. I love the creamy colours of this one and that funky date wheel. Whether or not the lefty thing is a help or a hindrance really depends on how often you're going to be wearing this one, I think. If you want to see more Tudor reviews, you have got plenty of choice. Why not check out my original review of the Righty Pelagos from last year or the Root Beer GMT from earlier this year. Thanks for watching. I will see you all again in a future video, I hope.